I say then that we cannot conceive of the process of creative sparks igniting the desire to read and write unless we think about process. The Americans taught us about process. That's to say, you cannot just think, chuck a book. You have to think of many processes that must go on for books to be available and accessible. So let's have a little think about what some of those might be. And I did. I've made a list. I sent it to Jim and Ed, just in case. Some of you will know about the Great Clackmannanshire experiment. Okay, this is where, thanks to you guys, Scotland, I'm going to blame you, you see. Okay, Clackmannanshire, there was a study on phonics, and this proved that phonics is the way that children learn how to read. Well, I can argue about that later, but anyway, very interestingly, in the experiment, there were several other things going on. I don't know whether you know, but the rule in science experiments is that you hold all the variables constant bar the one that you're testing. For some reason or another, in this Great Clackmannanshire experiment, not all the variables were held constant. You tell me. I don't know why, but anyway, David Cameron thought it was brilliant. Anyway, so look, one of the constants that weren't held, one of the variables that weren't held constant was that they brought in a home liaison teacher who went between the school and the homes talking to the parents about reading. It's a very, very simple thing. Because if you think about most schools, maybe it happens in your schools, it certainly doesn't happen in my daughter's school, there is no relationship between the school and the home to talk about books. I mean, it is quite absurd. Here they are. Just occasionally, you know, you go to a parents' meeting, and I'll come to this in a minute, and a teacher will say, oh, and don't forget to read to your kids. And, you know, and sitting in the room, there's a woman who's just arrived from the Congo who may not understand what she's saying, and then next to that there's a woman from Bangladesh who's getting things translated by her daughter, and she's going, don't forget to read to your kids. Read what? Where? How? Nobody says. So the simple thing of putting in place somebody who can go between school and home and talk, that's all, and say, what are you reading? Did you know there's a local library? Did you know that there's a book? Did you know there's a thing called a book club? You know, did you know that when you go to a local library, do you know you can get 12 books? Do you know books are free in this country? Isn't it extraordinary? Books are free. You get 12 books out on one ticket, and then you take them back the next day and you get another 12 books. And in fact, quite often libraries also have another thing, which clearly the teachers at the school that I went to in the film didn't know about, was that they could get 30 books out for 3 months on a school ticket. So in actual fact, if you take a class of kids down the library, you can come home with about like 100 books. For nothing. No homeschool. So in the Clackmannanshire experiment, they thought it was very important to have a homeschool liaison. When all the politicians get up and rave on about phonics, they never go phonics and a homeschool liaison officer. They just go phonics. Interesting. Does the school hold book events all the year round, with writers, illustrators, storytellers, librarians and book enthusiasts coming in, talking and performing for the children and parents? Another one of my little jolly visits that I had as the children's laureate was to go and see Jim Rose. I don't know whether that name means anything to you, but Jim Rose is the person who brought phonics into English schools, okay, and who said that everyone should do phonics, and it's what he calls the alphabetic principle. I won't argue with that for the moment. I just restrain myself. Take a deep breath. Good, carry on. And he said to me, he said, Mike, I've got the alphabetic principle in place. Now all we've got to do is make books come alive. How do you do that? And I thought, I'm talking to the top government advisor on literacy, and the bloke is saying, how do you make books come alive? So I said, well, do you mean me personally? He said, yeah, what do you do when you go into schools? So I thought, well, I've only been doing it for 40 years, so why should he know? Doesn't matter. So I said, well, I go in and I do poems. I go in and I perform the poems, and then I ask, the kids ask questions, and then I tell them about it. He said, that's brilliant. That's really good. He said, could you go around every school in the country? And I said, no, Jim, that's not really the point. The point is, what we have to do is to get everybody doing that. It's not just a sort of Mike Rosen ego trip. I know, you know, he gets off on quite a lot of that sort of stuff, but let's leave that to one side. Okay, the point is, it's about everybody making books come alive. He said, yes, I know, that's good. That's good, I'm going to think about that. I'm going to think about that. And so he went off and thought about it. I don't know what happened to that, but anyway. It's as if they haven't I don't know, something happened 50 years ago. I mean, I've been reading something very sad and enlightening and wonderful all at the same time. My dad died in July last year, and there's a journal called Changing English that has done a tribute to my dad. My dad was Professor Harold Rosen, who theorized about all this stuff 50, 40, 30, 20 years ago. Books and pamphlets and lectures all over the world, over and over again, about how do we make the leap between the children, the abstract ideas, children, school knowledge, all of this stuff. You know, you go back to the syllabus that he wrote for a comprehensive school in South London in 1958, when comprehensive schools were first invented in England. And these guys, they've been devising policies for the last 15 years as if all that other stuff never happened. As if teachers weren't doing these things, like going, hey, there's this fantastic story, and it's all about this king, and well, he isn't a king to start off with, but he wants to be king, so he kills the king. And I can't say his name because he's going to bring bad luck. And teachers have been doing this stuff. And then, in England, as I keep saying, it's been snatched away from them. You go now into English schools and you'll find what we call years 4, 5, and 6, no stories being read aloud from beginning to end. You know, I'm working with 30 schools eventually in Hackney on a writing project. And they admitted, plenty of the teachers in the room, that they do not, quote, have time, unquote, to read whole stories. And there's Jim Rose standing in front of me going, how do you make them come alive? As if somehow or other we don't know. And why is it important? You know, why is it important that we read stories out loud? If for only one narrow reason, it's how the cadence of the written language enters our heads. You know, the written language is a fundamentally different code from the day-to-day spoken code. When we speak to each other, we use gestures, we use our eyes, we use gaps, ellipses, back reference to things that nobody else outside that little group would know about. The written code can't do it. It's an impersonal code, even when it's being personal. People have to be named and renamed, and you have to say that somebody came in through the window rather than the door. You can't just go. You have to keep doing it and writing it down. And it's in these strange things called sentences that have these kind of strange beginnings and ends and weird adverbs that open it, like howevers and all the rest of it. It's a weird, strange thing for 5, 6, 7, 8, 9-year-olds, and some kids never fully get it. And it's not just about decoding it, as the phonics people call it. It's about getting the cadence of it, getting the shape and the sound of it. When we read aloud to the kids, they just get that. It enters their heads. And you can also talk and read at a level, if you like, if we want to talk about levels of sophistication, quite often at a higher level or at the next step or at a level of abstraction or complexity beyond the level that they could read to themselves. And also because it's face-to-face encounter, you can stop and say, does anyone want to ask me anything? Blimey, what do we think about what's going on now? You know, he's just chopped the head off Medusa. Wow, what do we think about that? You know, so you can go in the written, you can drop or rise up to the oral, and you can go back to the written. You can have that way of unpacking the written code in a way when you sit there as a young kid going, does the school not, oh God, when's this going to end? Invite in a book fair, but also, that's how kids read, because they're struggling with the item by item thing. They don't hear the sound and the cadence of it and know that if a sentence begins with does the school not only, it's got a shape that's already predicted, like a piece of music that's going to end on the tonic. It's the same sort of principle. They know that it's going to get there somewhere, all right? So that's one thing. It's absolutely crucial. But also, you know, when we bring in people who are somewhere or another responsible for books, this is like animating the book in the true sense of the word. It's reminding the children, perhaps they didn't even know, that books actually come from fellow human beings. It's all obvious to us. Why, as a kid, would you know that a book has any connection with a live human being? It could have been laid by a chicken. You're not to know. Quite seriously, why would you know? They just sit on shelves, and these strange beings called teachers who seem to have a strange life that is nothing like you and yours, and they stand there and grab these things and seem to know what's in them before they've even read them. And then they get to the end and they know what's in there, and they ask you questions they already know the answers to. That's very strange. It never happens at home like that. Well, not usually, you know. People ask you questions that they don't know the answers to, like, why did you do that? Actually, when my dad said that, he always did know why I did it. Anyway. So we connect books as a human activity. It is not immediately apparent to many children. It is from the educated homes where we're taking our kids off to meet authors and all the rest of it. For the other 90% of kids, it is a mystery, a complete mystery. I've had kids ask me, how did you make the book? And they hold it up in front of me, and I said I didn't, and they have no idea what I'm talking about. I didn't make the books, and people call printers and publishers, and you can see their mind going, "Wudong, what's he talking about? Wudong, I don't know what he's talking about." Well, how did you write it then? And I hold up a piece of paper with a piece of writing on it, and I said, and you know when you go to the computer and you go, and you turn your bit of writing into that, well, you could send that off to someone, and then they could print it. Quite often they don't know, particularly if it's a school that doesn't make books. We'll come back to that in a minute. Does the school not only invite in a syndicated book fair, but also invites in local bookshops, specialist bookshop, and has books available for borrowing or buying to support the visiting writers, speakers, performers, and storytellers? We've got stuck, thanks to the great gifts of huge international capitalism. We now have these book fairs that somehow know what your children want. So they turn up with books that are suitable for the child. There's no such thing as the child. Children are differentiated. You know, there's big ones and small ones, and brown ones and white ones, and bad ones and good ones, or whatever adjective you want to use. And kids with this interest and that interest. Syndicated book fairs don't know that. They go for some sort of basic core, or whatever they imagine is a sort of common denominator. We have to differentiate if we're interested in interesting our children. And we have to find ways of doing it. There's a wonderful book club called Letterbox Library that celebrates diversity. All right? They're very little known. It's an absolute tragedy. Look them up on the internet. Letterbox Library. They deal with books on human rights. They import books from the States that deal with African-American life in a way that we've never really come to terms with ways of dealing with Afro-Caribbean life. All right, it's not the same, but at least kids get a chance to possibly see figures that resemble them. They'll deal with diversity in many, many different ways. They deal with issues of human rights, with bullying, with emotional things, with medical matter, all sorts of things that you'll never find in the syndicated book fairs. Or, again, your local bookshop, if you have one. Or if you have one that's 10 miles away, 20 miles away, can you bully them to come into your school? All right? We haven't gotten to libraries yet. Is there someone in the school trained and interested in running the school library who's on hand to give advice to every teacher to help them with their class libraries? I don't know what it's like in Scotland. We are closing school libraries and local libraries at the moment. Again, lovely disjunction between what ministers are saying. Go to your local library, they say. Wirral has just closed 15 libraries. Okay? The Wirral near Liverpool. There are school libraries now being closed by the score as we're speaking. They're opening up the ICT units and saying, well, we've got ICT, so we don't need libraries. As if somehow or other the two experiences of browsing a book and sticking in front of a computer is the same or has the same worth. I mean, I just say they're different, all right? I'm not going to put relative worth in the matter, all right? So, and where there are libraries, quite often they are like they were in the film that I made. They're just like kind of weird, dusty cupboards that kids walk past. And occasionally a teacher goes there because they remember they left a book in there. You know, it is a disaster land at the moment. There is no priority for schools to think of libraries as a core place in a school that can resource learning. Because all you have to do now is go Google. And it's all there. The fact that, in actual fact, if you want to surf, if you read widely and often, that is a process you can do. It is very hard to learn how to surf just by surfing, as it happens. You know, I work with MA-level students, and I say, oh, right, if you Google that, that'd be really good. And they look at me slightly blankly, and I say, yeah, if you put the author's name in double quotes, and then you put the theme that you're interested in, and maybe the theoretician that you're interested in, so let's say it's, I don't know, Treasure Island, You won't have to put the author in, I don't think so, but you could just in case put Stevenson in, and then let's say you're interested in Freud, then put Freud in. Many of the students have never actually done that process. So they've come up through the computer world and not learnt how to identify field, how to do what is now called semantic surfing, if you like, and to get to the connections between things so you can get the knowledge that you want to get. So if people who are doing MAs aren't getting it, then why should 7- and 8-year-olds be doing it? In actual fact, what's happening is teachers are sending them to specific websites where they download some stuff and then they've got it, or something. You know, it isn't the same as reading widely and often, browsing in an open-ended way. You need librarians to do that. Librarians in the total global sense, school librarians, teacher librarians, and of course, local librarians. The expertise about children's books and children's literature has virtually vanished from English schools. It is quite extraordinary. In front of this group of teachers, they were talking about books and as individual books and saying, this is a good book, and that was great because, you know, I haven't heard that conversation going on between teachers for a long time, believe you me, where teachers were exciting other teachers in books. But then when I said, how do we resource that book? It's not sufficient to simply come into a classroom and read a book. How do you create a satellite of books? You've got 30 kids in your class. That means 30 books. Because what you could do is say, right, I finished that chapter. I'm not going to say anything, but there's some pile of books over there that are related in some way or another. Let's say it was Treasure Island. Well, it could be a book about islands. It could be a book about pirates. It could be a book about a fiction book about pirates. It could be a book about boys who narrate stories. It could be a diary. It could be a biography of Robert Louis Stevenson. It could be 20, 30 books. But how do you do it if you have no idea? If you've got no place to go in your mind, if you haven't read about children's books? The teacher training courses have had their literature component shrunk and shrunk and shrunk. There are people going into primary schools who've done a degree, done a PGCE, with 1 or 2 hours of children's literature. Can you do the whole history of children's literature in 2 hours? Challenge me, I'll have a go. It's crazy. Teachers don't know of book magazines like Books for Keeps and Carousel. They don't, you know, all the wonderful work that Book Trust do, Scottish Book Trust and the English Book Trust and so on do. There's swathes of teachers who have no idea. The stuff arrives and they look at it, Book Week. Oh, right, no, that's not us, is it? No, we don't do Book Week, we do phonics, don't we? Yeah, that's right. And it goes to one side. You know, because there is no reason to do it. As I say, I might be being Anglo-centric here. Does the school run book clubs for teachers, parents and children? It's ever so simple. We've discovered the thrill and the wonder of book clubs. It's so simple. Why not have a teacher's book club? You know, there's schools where teachers don't talk about what they read. Maybe they don't. I don't know. You know, I come into schools and there's this box full of, I don't know, it's sort of stuff to do with, what's that American woman who writes those kind of schlock biographies? Kitty... No, you don't know. You're too educated. You don't know. Kitty something or other. And then there's books about cake decorating. And it's some schlocky firm or other that sends stuff round to your schools, some sort of stuff, and it's just crap. And I just think these teachers, they're amongst the most educated people in the country. They've gone through college, they've decided they want to engage with teaching, this wonderful thing where you stand in front of kids and suddenly a light goes on, you know, and all that stuff. They show those adverts of a kid going, oh yeah, I get it. And the book club comes in, it's about cake decorating. I haven't got anything against cake decorating, it's great, but I mean, if you've got the environment at school, I mean, you can get the cake decorating thing at the Oxfam bookshop. There's piles of books on cake decorating in there. I've seen them. I bought one once. I should know. And you could have a book club where people just talked about interesting books that they've been reading, fiction, non-fiction, anything like that. It could involve parents. It could be one of the ways in which you make the bridge with parents. Let's have a parent-teachers book club once a month, once every 3 months. It wouldn't matter. Just the principle of it. Does the school give every parent information, perhaps in the form of an attractive pack, on the local library, the local bookshop? Does the school take children and parents to these venues? Why am I writing this stuff? Why isn't this completely obvious? When I went to that school in Wales, the library, the local library, was brilliantly situated. It was in the local shopping centre. It was perfect. The school had never taken kids 5-minute walk across the field, a nice little walk, straight into the shopping centre, into the library. The librarians were standing there waiting. The library was empty. Nobody comes to our library. And then up the other end, there's the kids. No, we don't read anything. It's over there. And it's free. You take the ticket, they give you, you go and get your ticket, you've got 12 books. You have any books you like. They don't have to be children's books. You can go over there, you can take, you can take out the collected works of Shakespeare, you can do it, whatever you want, and you can just go home with it. And then you just bring it back. And though you don't, well, they sort of say, and even if you kept it, no one's really going to get on your back because they'll buy another one. All right? They keep quiet about that, but you don't get fined. Whereas in my day, they used to send you to the tower for it. And all that's ended. It's not like, and they're nice as well. They're lovely. Lovely, lovely people. There was Maya, the woman there, if you saw it, and two lovely young women and so on, and they were so nice to the kids. We haven't seen children in here for ages. And we get one or two in here sometimes. What's the problem? All you've got to do is just go, books are important. They're good. They're nice. Have them, as my mother used to say. They're nice. Wear them. They're wearing them like that these days. So, did they like your coat? They hadn't been there. All you've got to do is just say, we'll go once a week, and then we'll just look at books. You don't even have to make it any more than that. We just go into the library and look at books, and then come home. It's quite easy, isn't it? It seems to be like even a lesson, really. You just write library on the timetable. You say, it's 5 minutes to get there, we'll spend 20 minutes there and 5 minutes back, so that's PE as well. Is that so hard? I don't know. Do the school and individual classes adopt an author or illustrator for the week or month or term and investigate, explore and do creative work around that author and illustrator? There's something dead simple. You don't even have to plan it. You just say, who should we do? Michael Morpurgo. OK. Chung chung on the internet, 30 books. OK, local library. Can we have all the Michael Morpurgo books? Right. Quick glance through, read a couple of them, and now we're going to study Michael Morpurgo. So how are we going, and you ask the class, you challenge them, how are we going to find out about Michael Morpurgo? So, we're going to Google and we're going to do all this. Let's write to him. He may answer, he may not. You never know with authors. They're a bind. Anyway, so you write to him, see what happens. And then we're going to find some pictures and some posters, and we'll find out about his life. And then we're going to resource some things to do with his life. Where was he born, and what sort of place was it? And, he went to this funny college. What was it called? Sandhurst. Blimey, and then he got out. He didn't like it. Why wouldn't he like it? What's that? Suddenly we're engaging with the guy. We're engaging with the books. And you could do that as a class, or you could do it with a school, a whole school, do a whole school project on an individual author, like that. See where you go with it. I mean, it's ever so simple. It's, all this stuff, all these programs of work and all this other stuff that the government keep dishing up, and it's all supposed to teach you the genres of persuasive writing, descriptive writing, and around the bend writing, and whatever writing, and all the rest of it. And it can all come from just that. You could just say Michael Morpurgo, and there it is. You've done it. You've got your non-fiction. You've got to say, halfway through the book on the wonderful short story, The Dancing Bear, you go, my God, what's he thinking? I tell you what, let's write a poem from the point of view of that man and what he's thinking, that old man. Ta-dong! Every kid would write a poem. There'd be no problem. The emotional power of it is so great, you're almost bursting to be in the guy's head. Or the bear. Be inside the bear's head. You are the bear. Boom. Who would like to be the bear? What's it feel like to be the bear? Tell us about it. And then write about it. OK? And what about bears? Hey, let's get a book on bears. Yeah, let's look at bears. What do bears do? What kind of bear is this? It's a grizzly. My God, where are grizzlies? They're scary. I know once, a kid says, put his hand up. I know a man who got eaten by a grizzly bear. He was making a film, and I saw it on the telly. He was Russian, and he said he was friends with the bears, and then they ate him. And you go, right, let's find out about that. And then you come back to the story, and there's something about a bloke who's playing a fiddle in the story, isn't there? Well, what's a fiddle? What is it? It's a violin. Have we got a violin in school? Let's get a violin out. OK, right. What's that do? And why is it called a violin and a fiddle? And what's the difference between fiddle playing and violin playing? And is it the same thing? It's all there. That's what these books offer. Satellites of reading and discovery. Do the children make books of their own? This is another one that mystifies me. Why do we have these things called exercise books? You still call them exercise books? Jotters. Is that what they're called here? And what about when they've done their final piece of work? Is that still in the jotter? No, what is it in then? Sorry? It's on a wall, that's good. I love that, that's it. Schools, all you've got to think of is why don't we make schools into publishing and performing houses? What is the point of a piece of writing stuck in a book, unless that's where the kid wants it to be? You know, I'm all in favour of journals and all the rest of it. But if you write, get it out there. Do you want anybody else to hear it? The performance bit. Stick it up on the wall. Make books. The children are readers, writers, writing readers, reading writers. It's continuous. It is absolutely crucial to helping children be helping children be readers to see themselves as writers who are read. It's a great big circle. It's not this weird thing that came out however many years ago it was, that there's writing over there, then there's reading and speaking and listening. And you get this tragedy where teachers, again, maybe just in England, where they go, good listening skills. Well, I don't know. Maybe they were half reading and listening at the same time. Or maybe they were like glancing down and reading and listening at the same. I don't get it. It's all fine if you want to separate them out as 4 different activities, fine, but don't kid yourselves that somehow they aren't crucially interconnected in ways that, in human dynamics terms, they're inseparable, you know? And the less separated they are, the better you are for it. Speaking, listening, reading, and writing. I don't mind the headings, so long as we understand that there's no gaps between them. It's all one word, speaking, listening, reading, writing. And these books that the kids make, they should be out with parents, grandparents, friends. They should be in the library. You should build up a stock of kids' books in the school library so that kids can go, I remember that kid who was in the school 5 years ago. He wrote that brilliant story about the time when he went into the shop and and that's there in the library. And kids talk about the other stories and poems that the kids have written in the same way as they talk about the great books that they like, Horrid Henry or whoever, yeah? It's all there. There's not an author in this country who wouldn't celebrate the idea that alongside their book, there was the book by Jim Smith and Mary Smith alongside them from the class. Does the school seize every possible moment? Visits to museum, visits from specialists of any kind, school trips to support these events and activities with books. We have to put ourselves in mind that when we go on these trips, they can be supported by the world of books and printed material. When you go to Edinburgh Castle or wherever it is, get the catalogue, get the guides and all the rest of it, even if they're very highfalutin and, you know, it's the ministry one of just the plan or something. Get it in the classroom. Get it there. Every visit and trip you make, whether it's to the beach, I don't know, it doesn't matter where. How can you support this trip with printed material? Only then do you start seeing that books invade the spaces. That's what makes them work. They are interventions in the spaces in our lives, in our emotional spaces, in our desire for facts and knowledge, in our desire for manuals and guides and help. And that way you see that there, look, you can walk round a museum and look at this and compare it like that. Yes, you can get the guide through your ear, but the great thing about the guide is you take it home. And then when you saw the bloody tower at the Tower of London and stuff, and then you can read up the little story about whoever it was who died in the bloody tower, you know, the princes and all the rest of it, and you read it and you connect it with what you saw, and then it's on your shelf, and then 5 years later you might look at it again. You make these connections. It's crucial. Is there at least one time every week where children will have nothing else to do with the book other than to read it? Instead of this nonsense with the Gorgon, where, you know, you get like a minute of text and immediately start quizzing them. Did you get the first word? What's the 8th word? What's the 14th word? What leg is Long John Silver's wooden bit on? You don't know, and you think you've understood Treasure Island? It's the other leg. No meeting, I've got to finish in a minute, no meeting held by teachers to help parents understand what literacy is should ever be without the presence in the room and the time to look at books. How many meetings on literacy have I sat through with my kids? And the teachers have sat there and they go on, it's a noun, it is consonant, CV, no, This is one of the ways we teach, and the children, they got, like, this kid's got a TH on his channel, he's got that, so that, and that's a phoneme, and we teach the children phoneme, and this is the grapheme. It's, is that both letters or is it just one? No, that's a digraph. Is it what? Digraph. And is a digraph. He's got, and you've sat there like that, you know, and there's no books in the room. What? We're talking about a thing called literacy, and there isn't the thing that you're literacy with in the room. I sat through one of these. It was called what did we call them? The early years. That's it. Early years literacy meeting. There were 35, 40 of us in the room, parents. And these two teachers presented it all, and I'm sitting there, and they were going through it and splitting up words and putting them back together and the rest of it. And then, to be fair, at the very end, the head teacher popped her head round the door and she said, and don't forget to read to your children. That's when I got the phrase, don't forget to read to your children. And then she went. There were no books in the room. I mean, I could have turned up with a truckload, because I just thought, wouldn't it be nice if just after all the, if that's what you're going to do, all that stuff, I don't know, anyway. And then just say, by the way, there's some great books here, have them. Just pull them out of the library and just say, well, take them home, but do remember to bring them back. I mean, it's like there was no relationship between a thing called literacy and the thing we call literature. No meeting that is ever called between parents and teachers and children that is talking about words or whatever word one wants to use to describe it, if you're not waving books around in front of them and showing parents, if that's what you think they don't know, and maybe they do and maybe they don't, how you can read them out loud. How when you read Where the Wild Things Are, the wild things, you can be a wild thing. I will eat you up. Wah! And then where's the wild things dancing bit? You can get up and have a wild things dance. He says, let the wild rumpus begin. Way, hooly, hooly, way, like that. And then you can sit down and carry on with it. That's what books is about. Anyway, look, I'm going to have to stop.